these are the ingredients that I will be using, including the potato. So let's make the sweet potato pone together. What you're going to do is you are first going to grater 3 sweet potatoes. So that's what I did. I did it in my my food processor because I find it easier to do so. If you could do it fine, that's better. The finer you shred it, the better it is. So I did it in my food processor. I shredded it as fine as I could. And you want to be careful with the sweet potato and what kind you use, right? Because this is a white flesh sweet potato, not these ones with the orange flesh. You really do want to use the white flesh one. Those are more starchy. That's what's really going to keep your sweet potato pone together. So I'm going to go ahead and pour that into, don't have a whole lot of space in this kitchen, pour that into a bowl. After that, really, I don't really follow any, like, I follow recipes, but I don't follow any order really. Like, I know you're supposed to add wet to dry. I just kind of do things my own way and make a little hodgepodge of everything. That said, the recipes and everything is going to be linked below so you can see it for your own usage. But you're going to need 3 sweet potatoes. Then I'm going to put in a 3/4 cup, 3/4 cup of coconut sugar. Almost all the products I'm using today are from Grace. No, Grace is not sponsoring this video, but maybe one day they will. You never know what may happen. So I'm using coconut sugar because it is low glycemic. It's a better sugar to use. You could use brown sugar. Brown sugar works as well in a 1-for-1 substitution. So just like I use 3/4 cup sugar of coconut sugar, you do 3/4 cup brown sugar. Then I'm going to add my egg, my flax egg. So instead of egg, because this is vegan and gluten-free, I made a flax egg. Flaxseed, you see how has gotten kind of goopy all together? Flaxseed is mucilaginous. It's gelatinous, which means that in water it has gelatin-like properties. So this is 2 tablespoons of flaxseed plus 6 tablespoons of water, and that will give you 2 flax eggs. You can substitute the ground flax seeds for chia seeds. What else does my recipe call for? I have my cheat sheet here. So, can of coconut milk. Here's a whole can of coconut milk. We're going to add that. There we go. So yes, the whole can, full fat coconut milk. Then it calls for half a teaspoon of ground cloves. Now I'm cooking like, you know, Jamaican people typically cook, like your grandmother might cook. I'm not measuring anything. I've made this enough times that I know how much cloves to use, how much cinnamon to use. This one calls for half teaspoon of cinnamon. You can't really overdo it in my opinion with the cinnamon, so I'm okay with like judging it. And then we have 2 teaspoons of vanilla. This one I don't want to overjudge, especially since this is the expensive kind of vanilla. Cool. And then we have a tablespoon of salt. Salt is important. Salt is important. So teaspoon of salt. 1 teaspoon. Here we go. I'm also going to put in a 1/4 teaspoon of browning. Browning is completely optional, but that's what makes your pone take on a nice brown color. You could buy browning at the grocery store. Grace is really the only brand I know that makes browning. Like I said, it's optional. If you can't find browning, you could use molasses, fancy molasses. I've found that to be a really good substitute because browning really is just burnt sugar. Now if these are ginger, 4th cup ginger. Now you could do ginger powder, but then it wouldn't be authentic, you know? So I'm gonna grater, I should actually grater in there. I'm gonna grater it in here. You wanna grater your ginger with fine shred. You know what, I'll grater it straight in here. You want to grater your ginger finely. On the fine side. I'm just checking the time because got places to go. Okay, once you have your 4th cup of ginger, you're going to also include your nutmeg. You could use ground nutmeg that's already store bought. I like grounding up my nutmeg myself because that ends up giving you a more pungent taste. So there's sometimes some spots in the recipe where you can take shortcuts, like you can use canned coconut milk. Other places where I don't want to take shortcuts. When people typically make this, like your typical Jamaican granny, they will make their own coconut milk, which means they will grater the coconut. They will put the coconut meat in water. They'll express the milk. They'll squeeze out all the water and the coconut milk, and they make their own, so it's fresh. I don't have time for that. I live in Canada. Sometimes coconuts are hard to come by. So I buy the can, and there's no shame in that. But when it comes to my spices, I want to make sure that I taste my spices. Then we have to add 2 cups cornmeal and 2 cups gluten-free flour. I have here 2 types of cornmeal. Sorry, 2 types of gluten-free flour. 1 type of cornmeal. Also from Grace. Where's my scissors? If you're going to use Bob's Red Mill cornmeal, tongue twister, make sure you use the fine one. And if gluten-free is an issue, make sure you use the one that is indeed gluten-free. So 2 cups. Wouldn't it be funny if this all spills over? Ha 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 ha. So obviously, almost had a kitchen mishap. That is not the best way to pick up the cornmeal. This is not an exact science, guys. Cooking is not an exact science, so I don't have to worry about getting everything perfect. At least when it comes to pone, there is some margin of error that you could have. So now let me put in my flour. That is, contrary to the cornmeal, it's not coming out. Man, bun this. Let me use the gluten-free, the other one. I'll use this one. So I have 2, not for any particular reason. Each gluten-free flour has its own type of recipe and makeup, you know? This one is more bean-based. You won't taste the beaniness once it's baked, but you do in the raw batter. I'll try this again. So I just use 2 for variety. For variety's sake. There we go. So, oops, we have. Okay, so we have our 2 cups of flour. One thing I forgot to add was the fat. I'm going to use coconut oil and the juice. Juice for 1 large orange or 2 small oranges. Just add some flavor. And then I'm going to add some oil. You can use vegan butter. I'm using coconut oil, and this recipe calls for I didn't write it down here. We're going to put 3/4 cup of oil. This recipe calls for 3/4 cup of oil. Ideally, you want it to be softened, kind of maybe softer than this. This is what happens when you do things in a rush, right? I mean, you're gonna have enough fat with the coconut milk. But there we go. Then you want to stir that all up. Yeah, you want to stir that all up. It's gonna be a pretty thick consistency. And I'll show you what it looks like. Oh no, guys, I gave up on stirring by hand. I took out my hand mixer, and that's what helped me do the job. So I mixed it. This is what it should look like. This is the type of consistency. Hold up. Where is my spoon? Okay, just so you can get an idea, right? It should be thick, right? It should be like, okay, let me move up the camera. Thick, like gloppy, like that, okay? Thick, so it's not a thin batter at all. I haven't even tasted it for sweetness, but if you wanted a little sweetener, I can't talk today. Sweeter, add more sweetener. If there is anything in here that you feel like needs to be adjusted, then you should adjust it. I am a strong proponent of tasting your batter before it goes into the oven. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this batter. I'm going to pour it into one of these. I think this is called a 9x14 pan. I'm going to line this pan or my Pyrex dish with some parchment paper. Pop it into the oven. Set the oven for 350 degrees Celsius. Fahrenheit, my bad. 350 Fahrenheit. Preheat it if you want to. Set it for 350 Fahrenheit. And this is going to bake for an hour and a half. So set your timer for 1.5 hours, okay? When it comes out, don't touch it. I'll tell you more about that. But when it comes out, you do need to let it set a little bit. Let it cool, or else it'll fall apart.